Hi, I'm Luminary Zion. This video is about what it's been like for me to be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in Japan. I was diagnosed at the end of October, and I officially got my diagnosis in the 1st of November of last year, 2013, which is kind of funny because that was also the month for diabetes awareness. Made it really easy for me to learn about diabetes at the time. The main reason that I want to make these videos is because I have had a hard time finding information in Japan about how to handle my diabetes, how to get what I need, what the best treatment options are. There's also a lot of limitations because of the fact that I'm in Japan, things that I can't get in Japan that maybe you being in America or Canada or wherever you're from might think is just normal, what you can get without even thinking about it. I've had a lot of struggles, and I've found some interesting and I think creative solutions to those struggles, and I want to share those with people also who might be facing a similar situation as me, being in Japan and really not knowing what to do. I found a lot of information online about how to handle diabetes if you're not in Japan, and I found information for people who were in Japan who kind of already knew what they were doing. Like they'd already been diabetic for a long time when they came to Japan, so they knew how to take care of themselves, or they at least had some idea, and it was just a matter of transitioning that to doing it in Japan. Whereas for me, I was already in Japan when I was diagnosed, so I didn't know what to do, and a lot of the information that I got from my doctors was blatantly incorrect, wrong, and I also want to kind of share what that information would be. But it's a lot to go over all at once, so I kind of want to take it in steps, a little bit at a time. For now, I think I'll just start with my story for how my diagnosis went, what I went through, and how I found out that I had diabetes, and wrapping up with my the very first suggestion that they had for standard injection therapy, insulin injection therapy for type 1 diabetics in Japan. For me, I mean, I guess it's nothing new, except I'm 32 now. Yes, I'm 32. I was 31 at the time. I just turned 32 in December of last year, and I got really tired. I remember being really tired and really, really thirsty, and I had to go to the bathroom all the time. And I remember mostly just the exhaustion. And I had a regular 9-to-5 job that I had to go to every day, Monday through Friday, and it was getting more and more exhausting to do that job. And the main trigger factor for me was the day that I was at work and so exhausted that literally the printer that was right behind me was too far away. I felt like that was just too far away, and I didn't want to go to the printer to pick up the papers that I had just printed because I was too tired. And that seemed odd to me, so I asked for a day off, for the rest of the day off. I left a little early, went home, and I woke up the next morning, and I was throwing up. And that's usually my personal trigger for myself, just that maybe I should go to the hospital, because throwing up is one of those big things for me. I don't ever throw up, and so if that happens, then that means something major is wrong. So I went to the hospital, which was a big ordeal. Nobody in Japan really has cars. I mean, yeah, people have cars, but most people don't have cars, and I don't have a car. And so I had to walk to the hospital on my own. I didn't, I could have called an ambulance, I guess, but I didn't realize how bad I really was. I was so tired, and I walked to the hospital. It's a walk that should literally take less than 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes if you take your time. But it took me 45 minutes to make that walk because of how tired I was. I just had no energy. And I made it to the hospital, and I signed in, because most hospitals around the area are kind of drop-in. You just go when you've got time, and they see you when they can. And so I told them about my symptoms, and I remember falling asleep in the waiting area. And a nice Japanese lady, she woke me up, and she asked, hey, are you this girl with these symptoms? Are you feeling okay? And I said I was really, really tired, but that was me. Yeah, that's me. I'm waiting. And they moved me to a waiting room in the back. They had me down in like a waiting bed, where they said, you can just sleep here so you're not looking all weird and like a hobo in the waiting room. And after a bit, they hooked me up to some IV, not IV? Yeah, IV drip, because they had determined that I was dehydrated. I don't know how they determined that, but they had determined that I was dehydrated. So they had me on an IV drip, and for me personally, I've always been the kind of person, even way back, I'm from the States, by the way. When I lived in the United States, I was a self-diagnosis kind of person. I would take care of myself. I knew my body well enough that I could go to the doctor and tell the doctor what I needed. And so for me, I've known for a long time that I've tended towards hypoglycemia. Not like diabetes, but I would get sudden sugar drops occasionally, especially if I hadn't eaten for a while. And then I knew that when that happened, I just needed to get something to eat, something sweet to eat, and I'd be fine. And so I told the doctor that I hadn't, because I'd been there for like at least 2 hours by then, and by then I'd usually had my breakfast, and so I was really hungry, and I was feeling hypoglycemic. So I told the doctors and the nurses that I'm hypoglycemic, and that I wanted to know if they had any Jell-O or something that I could eat just to help me feel a little bit more normal while I was waiting, and that I would be fine paying for it, because you pay for everything, really. And they were like, oh, wait a minute. And so they, after waiting and, doing all of the tests that they wanted to do, they finally had a look at my blood sugar, and it turned out that my blood sugar was something in the neighborhood of about 500 at the time. I'm sure if you're diabetic, you know what that means, but if you're not, just brief kind of info is your blood sugar needs to be between 80 and, for normal people, between 120. For diabetics, you kind of just want to be somewhere between 80 and 200 and you're fine. But I was 500, and when it comes to emergency situations, basically at about 800, 900, your organs start to shut down. And if you get up to, I think, 1,000 even, you're actually basically looking at death. So I was really, really high, but not death just yet. But I was working on it. And there's an interesting story about the mentality that I had about having to go to work and everything. If you want to know, let me know. I can make another video on that. But sticking to the hospital part now, so they checked my blood sugar, and I was 500, and they freaked out. They immediately disconnected the IV that they had me on and put me on a straight fluid drip, because they said that there was, I guess, nutrients of some kind in the IV that they were giving me before that was going to bring up my sugar as well. So that they immediately changed out my IV, and this is all being done in Japanese, by the way. I'm conversationally fluent. There's a lot of technical terms I still don't know. I'm still learning, but at the time, the new word of the day was "nyuin," which means to be checked into the hospital. That I had to stay. I wasn't allowed to go home, and that was really a blow for me. It's the first time that I've been checked into the hospital since I was 4 years old. So it was totally new territory, and being in a completely different country with my family and my friends. I was alone, and I'd just been checked into the hospital and it was terrifying. And I didn't know why. You know, they still didn't say diabetes. They didn't say what was going on because they wanted to run tests and they didn't want to, you know, give me some kind of a hint or something in terms of what they thought it might be without actually making sure. So nobody said much of anything except that they checked me into the hospital. They said that I was life-threatening and that I couldn't go to work. I couldn't go home. I had to stay, and that I would be staying for a little while. And that very night was the first time that they gave me an insulin injection. And they didn't tell me why. They didn't really run much in terms of tests, but at the first day they didn't run much in terms of tests. They were just trying to get me stable, I guess. But they started giving me insulin injections, and they didn't explain much of, you know, how they were deciding things. They just said, here, you need some insulin, and here's how much you're gonna get. Let's start with this and go from there. And I don't remember how much they gave me, but it wasn't much of anything. Mostly I just slept. The first 2 days out, it's all kind of a blur, but mostly I was just asleep. And I remember they did a whole bunch of different tests, and I remember the day that they actually sat down and said, okay, we think you have diabetes. There are 2 kinds of diabetes, and they went into the specifics. And, you know, again, if I have lots of people who are interested in knowing more about what is diabetes, I can make a different video on that. But this is mostly just the Japan-specific stuff. And they did the tests, and they determined that I was type 1 diabetes, which was another blow for me because I knew enough about diabetes to know that I would kind of prefer if I was type 2, as unlikely as that was going to be. And they said, so you're going to be on insulin. Here's how you inject your insulin. And the insulin that they gave me, originally, they started me on Apidra. You can see in Japanese, Apidra. And Lantus. And these are the pen things that you can take the cap off, and you put the needle on the front, you screw it on, and then you twist for how many units you need, and then you stab yourself ritually. Not ritually, but yeah. And so that was what they started me on, and then later on they changed me to Humalog. You can see the Japanese for Humalog. And Levemir. Now I'm on the insulin pump, and I can show you here my insulin pump, but we can talk about that stuff later. And the treatment. This is one thing that's going to be interesting for you people who are not in Japan, who are kind of wondering what's going on in Japan. They put me on fixed insulin therapy. What that means is that they told me to inject a certain number of units and just made sure to make sure that I ate enough food to cover that insulin. And I'm kind of a light eater. I've always eaten like a bird my whole life. It's maybe why I'm so skinny, I don't know. But so sitting down and eating a fixed amount of food and making sure that it was exactly this number of carbohydrates. And they didn't say anything about carbohydrates. That's another thing. They will never say carbohydrates. They just say you have to be careful what you eat and that you balance it with this many units of insulin. And another thing that's unique was because again, this is all in Japanese in Japan, and you have to learn to read packaging in Japanese. And I'm still struggling with the kanji, but I asked a nurse to show me, you know, on the back of a package, you know, what is the kanji that I need to be paying attention to. And she pointed to some kanji and said, this is what you need to pay attention to. And I asked a bilingual friend, a Japanese friend, to translate it, you know, tell me what the word was in actually spoken Japanese. And it turns out she was telling me to pay attention to fat and calories. You know, no one had any clue about carbohydrates. They were telling me to watch my calories. Mind-blowing. And that's really the main thing. When you first get diagnosed in Japan, no one's going to tell you anything about carbohydrates. No one's going to tell you why you're injecting a certain amount of insulin. They're just going to tell you inject this much insulin at this time of day, make sure you eat enough so that you don't go high or low. And if you go high, you know, they also want you to test, and there's more on that too. But so they tell you to check your blood sugar, and then they say if you go high, just, you know, inject some more insulin. If you go low, eat some more. But your actual baseline for how much insulin you're going to be injecting on a per meal basis. The breakfast should be 7 units, lunch should be 5 units, and dinner should be 10 units. And it was decided, like, well, what if I want to try a different meal for lunch? And they said, no, you can't do that. No, it has to be this much. And that's one of the things that's really unique about starting out in Japan with diabetes, is that when you're asking how do I take care of my condition, they're going to give you the fixed insulin therapy route. And it's not easy to change that, because it's not like you know how to, you've proven that you can take care of yourself. It's not like you know what you're doing. You're talking to a doctor and saying, hey, I want to do this, and they're going to say, no, the way that you take care of diabetes is like this. And so I guess that's my point number 1 for what it's like to have diabetes, to be diagnosed as diabetic in Japan. And just kind of, I don't know, I'm thinking maybe I will add some Japanese language instruction, maybe, if you guys want to know some diabetic terms in Japanese. So if you ever decide as a diabetic person to come to Japan and you need to know these words to communicate your condition on a daily basis, because it will come up. I guess for today, if you're interested, I'd like to teach you the word diabetes in Japanese, which is tonyobyo. Tonyobyo. And that to is for sugar, nyo is for when you pee, and byo is for illness. So literally in Japanese, it's the illness of the sweet pee, sweet urine. Tonyobyo. Give it a shot. See if you can say it. And if you want to send a recording to me and I'll tell you how it sounds, that's fine too. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to know more, if you have any questions, please just comment down below, like this video, and again, this was Luminary Zion, and have a good day.